demonstrations, and I think we've already talked about that around the country. Young people at Berkeley. We encourage our young people to get involved. I thought it was a beautiful sight.
This is going to be a short video. I just want to make an important point that I failed to make in my last video. It seems that a lot of the media is not honestly reporting on what happened at Berkeley, the Berkeley riots at the beginning of this month. Some are claiming that the rioters and violent protesters, the agitators, were paid outsiders. UC Berkeley are claiming that they're not UC Berkeley students. Some are claiming that the non-violent protesters had nothing to do with the violent ones and the rioters. Of course, the distinction should be made between those who were violent and those who were not, between those who rioted and those who did not. While some people lump them all together in the same exact category, others are trying to claim that there is more distance between them than what actually exists. So let's apply some critical thinking here, folks. Number 1. It is important to keep in mind Occam's razor. There it is on your screen. But don't worry, folks. Quite simply put, it just means that the simplest explanation that fits the evidence is the most likely explanation. You may have heard the very short, impolite version, which is keep it simple, stupid! And the most likely explanation here is that Antifa and BAMN were just doing what they usually do. Now keep this in mind, Antifa is nothing new. They go back many decades. They are far left-wing. They do claim to be anarcho-communists. They aren't, however, because if they were, they would be living in peaceful communities like indigenous tribes. But they do claim to be anarcho-communists and far left. In fact, they're so far left that they say, liberals get the bullet too. Think about that for a moment, folks. Number 2. There is no valid reason to think that they were not, at least in part, students of Berkeley. UC Berkeley claims that they do not know who the agitators were, but they also claim that they're not students. Obviously, if their identities are unknown, they may be students. There was another protest at another university recently where, it was later discovered, students left the protest to put on their black bloc clothing, get their flags, their weapons, and return to the protest to turn it into a riot. The blonde woman in the light jacket is getting pepper sprayed here. Here she is from another angle right after being pepper sprayed. Look at the woman with the dark wavy hair and the dark coat. I believe she's this woman here on the left. And there to our right is the woman with the blonde hair and the light jacket. It seems that she escaped being pepper sprayed here, but not here. As you can see her acting here as if her eyes hurt. So it is most likely that some of these black bloc people at Berkeley were students and some were not. turn off that music, you stupid protester. Thanks. Now hold on a second here. That seems to be the one that we just saw get beat down. And he seems to be an Asian American student who just wanted to exercise his right to peaceable assembly. Way to go, quote-unquote anti-racists. Oh, but I'm sure he's racist for coming to hear Milo speak, or to debate against him, or just to stand up for freedom of speech, or just for being in the way. I'm sure he deserved to be beat. I'm pretty sure that's him that they're taking up the stairs into the Martin Luther King building. And now, womansplaining with Tabitha.
Do you know who that Asian student was?
Actually, no.
Okay, when he jumped over the barrier to defend two women who were getting hit with sticks by the Antifa crowd right there. He just jumped over.
Who we just saw.
Yes. And so he jumped over and started slugging them. And he was winning. This Asian guy was kicking their asses. And so they didn't like it, because of course all Antifa are racist. They decided to swarm him like the little bitches that they are, and they dragged him along the fence line like some sort of demented river, and then began to stomp on his skull. They attempted to murder this guy.
Yeah.
That's why in the video he can't get up on his own. People are lifting him up. You know what? I don't know for sure, but I would guess there must have been some sort of skull fracture from the amount of people stomping on his fucking head.
Right.
You know, if there's someone who knows the fucking story on that, I would like to know, because I'm gonna guess that he probably had a skull fracture.
Right, and that's not the only attempted murder we'll see in this video. We'll see them try to blow up a gas station. Folks, if you are defending these people, you are defending potential murderers. And you are
the definition of a scumbag. Please, go drink bleach. Do us all a fucking favor.
This has been Womansplaining with Tabitha. And oh, the exquisite irony of these violent leftist fascists attacking minority students who have to run into the Martin Luther King Jr. Student Union building as if it is a castle, which these violent leftists besieged.
What the fuck?
She and her friends had to exit the building.
Oh, but of course they all deserved it, because I'm sure they were all literally Nazis. Moving on. Number 3. Antifa and BAMN would have done what they did whether or not they were paid, and whether or not they were infiltrated by paid outsiders. The fact of the matter is, this is what Antifa and BAMN do. I've documented some of this in my past videos. Number 4. With very few exceptions, the non-violent protesters did nothing to stop the violent protesters. They did next to nothing to distance themselves from the violent ones, and they did virtually nothing to distance themselves from the destructive rioters. If you watch videos about the Berkeley riot, you can see that people are beaten down, and only after people are beaten a few times while already unconscious do other people step in. Now don't get me wrong, you can see a few people trying to stop the violence, but these are almost all the people that were friends of the people being attacked. Number 5. Not only did the bulk of the protesters do nothing to distance themselves from the rioters and the violent ones, but they by and large, knowingly and willingly, marched behind Antifa. Antifa was their leader. As you can see on your screen, everybody is in fact following the Black Bloc Antifa members. It's as if the protesters were the body, Antifa was the head, BAMN was the brain, and the voice of that brain is Yvette Felarca, one of the leaders of BAMN.
Stands for by any means necessary.
By any means necessary.
Our whole name is the Coalition to Defend Affirmative Action,
Integration and Immigrant Rights, and fight for equality and immigrant rights.
by any means necessary.
Who happens to be batshit insane. This crazy lady was the voice of the brain that informed the head and the body and led them all.
Felarca with the group By Any Means Necessary.
By any means necessary.
Milo Yiannopoulos is a fascist.
I am, of course, not the racist or the sexist or anything else that the posters that they put up claim that I am.
He's a white supremacist.
White pride, white nationalism, white supremacy isn't the way to go.
He's a white supremacist.
Fuck you. How fucking dare you call me a white supremacist?
He's funded by Steve Bannon and Breitbart. He's an acolyte of Donald Trump. And he was on the UC Berkeley campus to try to recruit more fascists. And to wage attacks on Muslim students, immigrant students, women, and trans students.
And you shouldn't give a shit about skin color, you shouldn't give a shit about sexuality, you shouldn't give a shit about gender, and you should be deeply suspicious of the people who do.
This isn't a question of violent versus peaceful protests.
Well, she's not entirely right about that. But she's not entirely wrong about that either. The entire point of this video is that there are differences do matter, but that they were virtually all united against free speech.
I was there, and there were thousands of people out there who were united. It was a mass protest. It was a militant protest. And everyone was there to shut him down. And so whatever it was going to take to do that, we were all there with a united cause, and we were stunningly successful.
I thought it was a beautiful sight.
When you take the barricades and you destroy the building, and when you set fires, isn't that counterproductive?
You know, I think that the left has been far too timid for way too long. And it's why we've even gotten in this position where we even have someone like Donald Trump leading a fascist movement as the President of the United States. We need to make sure that we have more mass protests, more militant protests that are mass and militant.
Mass and militant?
Militant, integrated, direct action. Mass protests, more militant protests that are mass and militant.
So I think what you're saying is a mass militant movement that is mass and militant. Folks, I think she wants to lead her own army. I think she's hoping for Cal exit. And I think she wants to become dictator of the Republic of California. Remember, always accuse your enemies of that which you are guilty of doing yourself. Follow all the rules in the Machiavellian playbook.
Our method is to build a mass militant, more militant protest. And to do that and getting as many people as possible to take militant mass direct action.
But wait a minute, should they be mass and militant? Are you sure?
Mass militant, more militant protests. Militant, integrated, direct action.
Mass militant, militant, mass militant, militant,
and militant. And the reality is that these aren't people just putting forward their ideas.
You should be aspiring to values and to ideas. You should be focusing on what unites people, not what drives them apart. And you shouldn't give a shit about skin color, you shouldn't give a shit about sexuality, you shouldn't give a shit about gender, and you should be deeply suspicious of the people who do.
But now what I think was so important about our success on Wednesday, which is why it should be the model for how the movement needs to take things now in the future.
I thought it was a beautiful sight.
Really?
Yeah, because, but let me finish, is because we need to make sure that the millions of people out there who are angry and who are scared under Donald Trump and everything that he's doing now know that there are people out there who will stand up and fight the way the movement needs to.
We encourage our young people to get involved.
It was people fighting united in a mass effort, in a united effort, and by any means necessary. A few broken windows is nothing compared to the lives that are at stake. And if that's what it takes in order to make sure that more people don't get targeted, if that's what it takes to make sure that Milo Yiannopoulos or another white supremacist is not welcome or allowed to come to UC Berkeley and attack our community, then good. Let's make sure then that that doesn't happen in the future.
So no regrets at all about what took place?
You know, what we need to do is we've got to draw lessons from this in terms of how we can build and build even stronger, how we can make sure that we build the movement, and also that we continue to organize, because it's not spontaneous. This is about organizing and fighting by any means necessary.
All right. Yvette, thank you so much.
This crazy lady was the voice of the brain that informed the head and the body and led them all. As local reporters reported, many in the crowd were not only students of Berkeley, but professors of Berkeley and other local schools. Yvette Felarca, of course, is a high school teacher, who allegedly, by the way, is in trouble for kidnapping a minor. People, do not believe the hype. Don't believe it when they downplay this. These are, most likely, genuine far leftists, and they did in fact lead the protest. So though it is true that protesters have varying degrees of guilt, they all did support a riot against freedom of speech. So while the protesters have varying levels of guilt, they all did support an anti-free speech riot. That is in fact what they did, and that is what is most important here, this anti-free speech movement. And it seems that many of you out there automatically assume that if somebody's accused of being a racist or a Nazi, that they are. That's not how reality works, people. Cut it out. Use your brains. Think about it, people. Look into these people that they are claiming are racist. Many of them are not. Use your critical thinking skills, kids. Whether or not they were real Antifa members or paid outsiders is beside the point. The point is that these people followed who they thought were Antifa members, who they knew were the violent ones, who they saw stop people, who they saw destroy things. According to local reporters, many of these people are students and teachers who are rallying behind the very people who are destroying the college. Yep. Think about that. Is that sane? Is that rational? Is that ethical? Is that wise? Is that something you should support? Is that something you should downplay or deny? No, of course not. We need to face this stuff head on, unflinchingly. Look it right in the eye and do not blink and deal with it.
Woo! Shit! Oh no!
In closing, yes, there are differences. Differences do matter. At the same time, they all supported the riot. They did nothing to distance themselves from the rioters. They did almost nothing to stop the violence. And they were all united in using destruction, violence, and fear against freedom of speech.